Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time. So far back, you can feel the desert heat pressing into your skin. The kind of dry warmth that clings to your clothes and makes you wonder how anyone survived before the invention of iced tea. You're in ancient Egypt, in a little place called Syene, a town perched close to the first cataract of the Nile. The sand beneath your sandals is scorching, and the air wavers with heat. But here's the curious part. When you stand a stick straight up in the ground at noon, there's no shadow at all. It disappears, swallowed by the sun blazing directly overhead. And that little vanishing trick? It's about to tell humanity something outrageous, that the Earth itself has a measurable size. You probably won't survive this heat stroke level experiment, but let's press on anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cicadas are buzzing in the palm trees as you stand in Syene, trying not to faint from the intensity of the midday sun. The Nile glimmers beside you, sluggish and greenish brown, but alive with reeds, boats, and chatter from villagers hauling bundles of papyrus. This is no quiet scholarly retreat. It's noisy, sweaty, and yet in the middle of this bustling town, the sun is performing a cosmic trick just for you. At the summer solstice, it shines directly overhead, so wells reveal their water clearly at the bottom, and the sticks planted upright cast no shadows. For the people here, this is just a neat quirk of the season. For someone paying attention, though, it's a key to the planet. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand and imagine yourself as an ancient Egyptian farmer. You don't care about global measurements. You care about whether your crops will live. But still, you notice. When the sun stands directly above, you could nearly balance a plumb line perfectly vertical, and no dark shape falls at your feet. That's worth a second thought. Centuries later, historians will puzzle over what exactly people in Syene thought of this phenomenon. Did they laugh at travelers from other regions who still had stubby little shadows at noon? Did children stick their arms up, amazed that the sun erased them? We'll never know. Historians still argue whether locals passed down this observation as folk knowledge, or whether it took a curious mind in Alexandria to piece the puzzle together. But here, standing in Syene, you get to experience it firsthand. The mainstream fact is clear enough. The sun's overhead position at Syene during the summer solstice is not some illusion. It's a geographical reality thanks to the town's position near the Tropic of Cancer. On that single day, light plunges straight down, as if the heavens forgot about angles. That's what Eratosthenes would one day use to measure Earth itself. Here's your quirky tidbit. Imagine the local priests, bored during the hottest part of the year, lowering mirrors into the wells and joking about glimpsing the gods in the reflection, since the sun shot down so perfectly. Maybe someone even invented a drinking game. First one to spot their face in the sacred well water gets out of irrigation duty tomorrow. Okay, probably not. But the human impulse to laugh at strange natural events must have been alive then too. As you lean on your stick and watch the shimmering horizon, you get the sense of something larger, patterns hiding in plain sight. If the sun can do this here, what is it doing elsewhere? And more importantly, what might those differences mean about the world itself? The ancients didn't have Google Earth, but they had wells, shadows, and curiosity. Put them together, and suddenly the planet isn't an infinite flat sprawl. It's a round body with a size you might actually calculate. The longer you stand here, the more surreal it feels. Your shadow has deserted you, as if you've briefly become invisible. The ground hums with heat, the palms tremble slightly in the breeze, and the Nile pushes steadily past as it has for thousands of years. You imagine scribes noting down the strangeness, priests chalking it up to divine order, children playing hide-and-seek with shadows that refuse to appear. And through it all, you stand in the blistering brightness, not realizing that you're standing at the starting line of one of humanity's cleverest experiments. By the time the afternoon drifts in and your shadow stretches back into existence, you've gained a new respect for that simple stick in the ground. It's more than a toy for timekeeping. It's a tool that, in the right hands, could take the measure of the world. You squint toward the horizon, where Alexandria lies far to the north, and wonder what kind of mind would think to compare what you're seeing here with what someone else might see there. For now, though, you let the evening breeze wash over your shoulders. The heat is easing, your shadow is back, and the stars will rise soon. Somewhere far away, a scholar named Eratosthenes is waiting for word from Siene, ready to scribble numbers that will stun the ages. You've just taken the first step into his story, and the world already feels a little smaller, a little more measurable. You leave Syene behind in your imagination and drift northward, riding the lazy current of the Nile as papyrus boats slide past. The heat softens as you move toward Alexandria, that great Greek city glued onto Egyptian soil, its marble colonnades and libraries gleaming like a mirage against the desert. Alexandria is noisy, cosmopolitan, dripping with the scent of olive oil and ink, and buzzing with scholars who argue over everything from geometry to how many teeth a horse really has. This is where Eratosthenes spends his days. Well, technically, where he spends his days buried under piles of scrolls in the Library of Alexandria, which, you have to admit, is a pretty glamorous workplace if you don't mind the occasional risk of paper cuts. You picture him there, sitting at a desk carved smooth by years of elbows, a reed pen between his fingers, stacks of documents teetering precariously around him like the world's first fire hazard. He's the chief librarian, which sounds like a cushy title, but it really means he's the person expected to keep track of scrolls that never stop multiplying. Imagine trying to catalog everything humans had written up to that point without Dewey Decimal or Google Drive. Honestly, you'd probably hide under a papyrus pile and hope no one asked you anything. But Eratosthenes wasn't just a glorified scroll babysitter. He was curious, restless, the kind of person who would hear about that shadowless noon down in Syene and immediately want to connect the dots. He read widely poetry, geography, philosophy, and his mind leapt constantly from one subject to another. It's said he was nicknamed Beta by his peers, as if to say he was always second best, never the top expert in any one field. But you know what? Beta minds often see connections the alpha specialists miss. And in this case, Beta was about to measure the whole darn planet with nothing but a stick, a shadow, and some geometry. Picture Alexandria's streets, merchants yelling about figs, camels braying, Greek philosophers waving their hands wildly in debate, while Egyptian priests mutter prayers nearby. And somewhere in this chaos, Eratosthenes is jotting notes about shadows, angles, and distances. The library is his kingdom. Scrolls brought from ships docking in the harbor are seized by the state, copied by scribes, and shelved under his watchful eye. So when a traveler from Syene or a priest bearing news about the sun's peculiar trick wanders in, he has the perfect environment to cross-pollinate ideas. It's like the ancient equivalent of scrolling Wikipedia at 3 a.m., but with slightly worse ergonomics. Mainstream fact time. The Library of Alexandria really was a hub of learning in the 3rd century BCE, gathering texts from across the known world. Eratosthenes had access to knowledge from Babylon, India, Greece, and Egypt, all under one roof. That cross-cultural stew gave him the intellectual ingredients to cook up something as bold as measuring Earth. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some accounts say the library had a ship policy. Every vessel docking in Alexandria had to surrender any texts on board to be copied. The originals went into the library, and copies, often worse quality, were returned. Imagine being a sailor dropping off a precious family chronicle, only to get back something scribbled by a scribe who sneezed halfway through. Maybe that's why some captains avoided writing things down entirely. No, lads, we're not keeping a logbook. Those librarians will just nick it. As you walk through Alexandria in your mind, the chatter of multiple languages whirls around you. Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Phoenician. A donkey shuffles past carrying clay jars, while a scholar mutters to himself about the curvature of the earth. The air smells faintly of parchment glue, honey cakes, and sea salt. It's an intoxicating mix that makes you both dizzy and oddly awake, like drinking strong coffee too late at night. And in the middle of it all, Eratosthenes is quietly preparing to test one of humanity's boldest questions. How big is the Earth we live on? Historians still argue whether he actually traveled to Syene himself or relied on reports from others. Did he sweat it out under that burning sun personally, or did he simply take notes from a trusted messenger? Either way, the data landed in his lap, and the gears in his head began turning. He needed only one other piece of the puzzle, what the sun looked like in Alexandria at the same time. So picture him on the summer solstice, walking out into the streets of Alexandria at noon. He plants a stick, technically a gnomon, into the ground, squints at the shadow it casts, and measures the angle. It isn't zero. It's something like 7.2 degrees. And if it's 7.2 degrees here while it's zero in Cn, then, well, that implies the surface of the Earth is curved, which means, brace yourself, the Earth is a sphere. Mind blown. Cue the ancient equivalent of a standing ovation, which was probably just some polite clapping with fig-sticky hands. The geometry is basic by today's standards, but revolutionary then. If 7.2 degrees is about 1/50th of a circle, then the distance between Syene and Alexandria must also be 1/50th of Earth's circumference. Multiply it out, and you've got a number that's astonishingly close to the real one. And he did it without satellites, without lasers, without GPS, just scrolls, shadows, and patience. As you stand with him in the bright Alexandrian sun, watching that tiny stick and its stubborn little shadow, you can't help but laugh. People today misplace their phones in panic. Eratosthenes misplaced the edge of the world and calmly redrew it. Maybe being called beta wasn't an insult after all. Maybe it was exactly what the world needed, a second-best generalist who could see the whole picture, while everyone else obsessed over one corner. By the time the afternoon cools and the long shadows stretch across the white stone streets, Eratosthenes has in his mind the scale of the planet beneath his feet. You walk back with him toward the library, where scrolls whisper with the knowledge of generations. The city hums, the sea crashes faintly in the distance, and a man with ink-stained fingers quietly changes the way humanity understands itself. The Nile is still in your ears, the murmur of water and trade, but your focus sharpens onto that one moment when Eratosthenes decides to gamble on math. He isn't thinking of conquest or treasure. He's thinking of shadows and distances. You picture him, sandals crunching against the pale stones of Alexandria, rehearsing numbers in his head like some ancient beat poet. 7.2 degrees, 1/50th of a circle. Syene to Alexandria about 5,000 stadia. That multiplication humming under his breath like a secret hymn. But here's the snag. You need the distance between those cities, and no one's pulling out Google Maps. What he has instead is the old-school solution, camel caravans. Traders and runners have been trudging that dusty road for centuries, counting the miles by heartbeats and footsteps. Their estimates, passed along like gossip, become the numbers in Eratosthenes' notebook. He doesn't need perfect precision. He just needs ballpark figures. In his head, Alexandria and Syene become beads on the string of Earth, and all he has to do is count the gaps. Mainstream fact, ancient stodia weren't standardized, which complicates our understanding of his calculation. Depending on which stadium length you assume, Eratosthenes' Earth's circumference comes out either incredibly close to the real figure, within 2%, or a bit off but still impressive. Either way, you have to admit, calculating the size of a planet using two sticks and hearsay about camel journeys is a flex few people could pull off. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some say Eratosthenes might have used professional bematists, literally human step counters. These were men trained to measure distances by walking, counting their steps with uncanny precision across vast deserts. Imagine your Fitbit, but instead of buzzing your wrist when you hit 10,000, your entire civilization depends on your legs not losing count. You'd probably never complain about your morning jog again. Now close your eyes and imagine the caravan road itself. It's late morning. The sand is pale, blinding under the sun. Camels sway like ships at sea, their long necks cutting silhouettes against the endless horizon. Traders call to each other, bartering figs for salt, leather for grain. The heat sticks to your skin like glue, and every few minutes someone mutters a prayer for shade. Somewhere among them, a Bemetist taps his staff on the ground, counting steps with monastic discipline. Each tap, each stride, an invisible stitch in the fabric of measurement that Eratosthenes will later unravel into cosmic geometry. Historians still argue whether Eratosthenes' number was pure calculation or whether he borrowed heavily from Egyptian surveying traditions. After all, the Nile floodplain had been measured and mapped meticulously for centuries to calculate taxes on farmland. Maybe he was less a lone genius than a skilled synthesizer of knowledge already bubbling around him. But then again, isn't that its own kind of genius? To see patterns in what others dismiss as background noise? You drift into his study that evening. The lamps are lit, olive oil flickering against the shelves. Papyrus crinkles under his fingers as he sketches circles, dividing the earth like a pie. His reed pen scratches softly. 7.2 to 1/50th, distance x 50. He leans back, eyes closed, lips twitching with the thrill of it. You feel the hush in the room, the kind of hush when an idea lands so perfectly that even the air doesn't want to disturb it. And then the quiet joke of history. Eratosthenes never set out to be the man who measured the earth. He was a librarian, a poet, a second-choice scholar juggling too many scrolls. Yet here he is, outmathing kings and generals with the elegance of a sunbeam. He doesn't need spears or walls. He just needs a shadow at noon and a long enough road. You walk with him in your mind as he steps outside once more, testing his gnomon, watching the angle. The stick leans into the afternoon sun, shadow steady as a ruler. He smiles faintly, perhaps already imagining sailors one day trusting their bearings on seas too wide to see across, using maps that trace a globe rather than a flat slab. He may not live to watch it unfold, but the numbers are there, tucked away in the library like seeds. The hum of Alexandria returns as he leaves his desk. Outside, children shout in Greek, vendors hawk honey cakes, and a donkey squeals irritably under its load. None of them notice that a man just weighed the planet in his mind, and you, trailing behind him in this imagined walk, can't help but chuckle. Some days you can't even remember your Wi-Fi password. Eratosthenes remembered the circumference of Earth. The city never quite sleeps, but you slip into the quieter corners with him, where the library's endless stacks smell of papyrus, cedar oil, and dust. You follow Eratosthenes into a vaulted chamber, where scrolls lie bundled like coiled snakes, each one hissing with knowledge waiting to be unrolled. By now, he's sitting with the figures from Syene and Alexandria, dancing across his desk. 7.2 degrees, again and again. He traces it, almost humming like a lullaby. Multiply by 50, multiply by the caravan distance, and there it is, the circumference of Earth. Not just a number, but a secret whispered from the cosmos into the hands of a librarian with ink-stained fingers. Mainstream fact. The number he produced hovers around 39,375 kilometers, shockingly close to the true circumference of about 40,75. With nothing but shadows and second-hand measurements, he hit within striking distance of what modern satellites confirm from orbit. Imagine that. Your phone's GPS relies on math so ancient it was scribbled by candlelight more than 2,000 years ago. But here's your quirky tidbit. His enemies called him Beta, not like the tech version, but the ancient Greek insult. He was considered second best at everything. Not the greatest poet, not the sharpest philosopher, not the most athletic. Picture that nickname muttered in schoolyard tones. Oh, here comes Beta. And yet the so-called runner-up ended up calculating the size of the planet before anyone else even dared to try. Kind of makes you want to proudly own the second-place trophy on your shelf, doesn't it? The chamber fills with the murmur of other scholars, hunched over astronomy, geography, medicine. A young scribe sneezes into a scroll of Homer, while another fumbles with ink that drips like black tears across his tunic. You lean closer, watching Eratosthenes' reed pen slice neat lines across the page, circles within circles, angles stitched like embroidery. This is no grand theater or battlefield, but history is being carved with shadows instead of swords. Now imagine the hush that falls when he announces his result. Not to a roaring crowd, but to colleagues leaning in around a cracked wooden table. Some nod, half impressed. Others roll their eyes, muttering that a number pulled from shadows couldn't possibly mean much. Historians still argue whether his result was widely celebrated or barely noticed. Did it ripple out into the Mediterranean world, or was it another scroll gathering dust in the labyrinthine library? Either way, you picture him shrugging at the skeptics, his lips curling in a faint, tired grin. Outside the library, the Mediterranean stretches wide and glittering. Traders haul amphorae of wine, fishermen mend their nets, sailors argue about winds. To them, the world is still a map of ports and coastlines, maybe flat, maybe round. It doesn't matter so long as the nets come back full. But you can't help but sense the quiet enormity of what Eratosthenes has done. He's turned the earth itself into a measurable thing, something you could, in theory, hold between your fingers on a scale. The image lingers, his gnomon planted in the ground like a wizard's staff, a shadow slicing the stone at just the right angle, numbers spiraling outward into the air. You might laugh, thinking of modern tools, satellites, laser beams bouncing off the moon. And yet here's a man proving that sometimes all you need to measure the impossible is patience, a stick, and the stubborn belief that shadows tell the truth. For a brief sleepy moment, you let yourself drift deeper into that room. The lamp flames wobble, casting halos of light. A moth bounces clumsily against the parchment, ignored. Eratosthenes, scribbling calmly, pauses only to sip watered wine, as though calculating the size of Earth were just another late-night chore, like balancing accounts or sharpening a blade. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't leap to proclaim himself. He just writes. And maybe that's why the story lasts, because it wasn't about spectacle, it was about quiet precision. You smile at the irony. The man mocked as beta left behind a calculation that will never fade, while the alphas who sneered at him are long since forgotten. History has a wicked sense of humor. The days bleed together as the city hums on, but you find yourself trailing Eratosthenes beyond the library now, into the bustling avenues of Alexandria. Vendors shout in Greek, Egyptian, and half a dozen dialects, selling honey cakes, pomegranates, linen tunics. Donkeys bray, wheels clatter over stone, and in the background the sea keeps breathing against the harbor walls. All the while he carries in his head the weight of Earth's circumference, a number no one else has ever dared to hold. And strangely, he treats it with the same casual calm as you might treat a shopping list. The mainstream fact here, Eratosthenes wasn't just an astronomer, he was a polymath. He mapped rivers and mountain ranges, drafted treatises on poetry, philosophy, and even invented the sieve still used in number theory today to identify prime numbers. Imagine multitasking like that. Yes, I'll calculate the planet's size, but first let me refine your math homework. A librarian of the world juggling cosmos and culture. Quirky tidbit, some later writers claim he tested his own body's endurance by fasting and feasting in cycles, trying to figure out the best balance between gluttony and asceticism. Picture him solemnly chewing figs one week, then sipping only water the next, jotting notes like, conclusion, figs better. It's a diet experiment centuries before trendy juice cleanses. You'd almost expect him to start a wellness channel, Beta's Guide to Balance. Subscribe for shadow math and fasting tips. Still, debates cling to his legacy. Historians still argue whether he truly measured with caravan distances or relied on hearsay about Cyane's latitude. Was the number precise calculation or lucky guesswork? Some scholars whisper that his results were too neat, too perfect, like a magician revealing a trick with suspicious timing. Yet whether he leaned on luck or genius, the outcome reshaped how later generations imagined the world. You trail him through the streets, imagining the odd double life. By day, a man who managed the library scrolls and argued about grammar. By night, someone who had measured the very planet under his sandals. He probably never shouted it in the marketplace. No breaking news, Earth is round and huge. Instead, he slipped home quietly, greeted by the creak of wooden doors, perhaps a servant offering bread and olive oil. Ordinary rhythms framed extraordinary truths. The city's harbor glows with firelight as ships rock gently, ropes creaking, sailors calling to one another. A gull wheels overhead, its cry cutting through the hum. You stand there with him, leaning against the cool stone, and try to grasp it. The earth, vast and curved, measured by a mind that never left Egypt's borders. It feels both grand and strangely intimate, like discovering that your backyard holds the blueprint to the entire universe. A donkey stumbles past, nearly knocking into a group of musicians. Flutes and lyres carried carelessly, their players laughing at some private joke. Life goes on, indifferent to the man who just charted the planet. That's the charm and the humility of it. He wasn't worshipped for the discovery, wasn't crowned in gold. Just Beta, the second best, wandering home after an ordinary day, while the stars above twinkled at his secret. You pause in the quiet of his study, where the shadows once again creep long across the floor. The stick, the gnomon, still stands there like an old friend. Its shadow stretches, a silent reminder of what it revealed. And you can't help but feel grateful for the simplicity, that answers don't always come from armies, or temples, or grand machines. Sometimes they rise from silence, angles, and the patient gaze of one man listening to the earth whisper back. The night has grown softer now, Alexandria sinking into its hush. Lamps gutter in the wind, casting warm halos on plaster walls, while cats slink between alleys, hunting scraps from market stalls, long since packed away. You trail after Eratosthenes one final time, but his steps are slowing, his shoulders bowed with age. He has measured the earth, mapped rivers, and argued with poets, but time, as it always does, measures him in return. The mainstream fact comes quietly. In his old age, his eyesight began to fail. The same eyes that had read shadows like cosmic secrets, that had scanned the curve of the heavens, slowly betrayed him. For a man whose entire life was built on observing, on seeing angles, numbers, stars, blindness was a cruelty sharper than any enemy's blade. Accounts suggest he withdrew, retreating into himself, until one day he chose to let go of food and drink altogether, slipping into the stillness he had once calculated with so much vigor. A quirky tidbit. Later gossip says he liked to call himself Pentathlos, after athletes who competed in 5 events because he dabbled in so many fields. You can almost hear him muttering with wry pride, "Not the fastest, not the strongest, but at least I showed up to all the games." Imagine carving that into a gravestone. Here lies Beta, second best at everything, except measuring planets, which no one else managed. But historians still argue whether his measurement was really understood by his contemporaries. Did ordinary Alexandrians know they walked atop a globe, or did they shrug it off as academic babble? Some suggest his ideas were admired by scholars, yet ignored by farmers, sailors, and merchants, who still navigated by landmarks and gut instinct. Knowledge, like a lamp in a vast desert, only illuminated those standing near. You picture his final days in a chamber cooled by thick stone, the whisper of Nile breezes slipping through lattice windows. A student might have sat by his side, reading from a scroll, while his master's dimming eyes listened. Outside, the city still pulsed. Dock workers unloading amphorae, priests chanting, children chasing each other with olive branches. Inside, a man who once wrapped his mind around Earth's circumference now wrapped himself in silence. Yet his story doesn't end there. Centuries later, others picked up the thread. Islamic scholars in Baghdad, Renaissance thinkers in Europe, modern scientists firing lasers to the moon. They all stand, knowingly or not, on the shoulders of a man with a stick in Egypt. You can almost laugh at the continuity. Satellites whirring above the atmosphere are just high-tech echoes of Eratosthenes squinting at a shadow. You step out into Alexandria's evening one last time. The Pharaoh's lighthouse beams across the dark waves, steady and unblinking. Above, stars scatter in impossible abundance, Sirius shimmering, Orion stretching, constellations the Egyptians once worshipped, now twinkling like old friends. You feel the curve of the earth beneath your feet, not as a guess, not as an abstraction, but as something measured, proven, lived. The donkeys have quieted, the gulls are asleep, and even the sea seems to sigh more slowly. You breathe with it, a rhythm that reaches back to Eratosthenes and forward to every curious soul who dares to measure the immeasurable. In the silence, his presence lingers, a reminder that greatness sometimes hides in plain daylight, armed with nothing more than patience, a question, and a shadow. And so you lie back, eyelids heavier now, the city fading around you. You see one man's stick marking the sand, the shadow stretching, the angle forming, and the globe itself rolling gently beneath you. It all seems both vast and intimate, like being tucked under a blanket the size of the planet. You're small, yes, but in the same breath, you are also part of the measurement. The whispers of Alexandria dissolve into the sound of your own breathing. The Pharaoh's fades, the stars blur, and Eratosthenes' shadow, sharp once, now softened by time, recedes into the dark. You drift with it, surrendering to the curve of sleep, to the certainty that the world has always been round, and that tonight it holds you just as gently as it once held him. You're in the courtyard of Karnak, sandals sinking slightly into dust, as priests parade past in spotless white linen, chanting hymns to Amun, the hidden one, the king of gods. This cult is the backbone of Thebes, its wealth dripping from every gilded column. Offerings pour in daily: bread, beer, cattle, jewels. The treasury overflows, not for the pharaoh's pockets, but for Amun's priests, who wield enough power to make even kings nervous. The mainstream fact here: by the late 18th dynasty, the cult of Amun had grown into a religious and political juggernaut, practically running Thebes as a state within a state. You glance at the pharaoh's palace, wondering if the guy on the throne ever feels overshadowed by men in feathered headdresses. Spoiler, he does. Amid the swirl of incense and power plays grows a prince named Amenhotep IV. Imagine him as a lanky teenager with too much eyeliner, wandering past walls crammed with gods who look like a zoo's worth of mascots. Hawks, ibises, lions, hippos. It's like an entire animal-themed cereal lineup turned divine. He studies them, sure, but his eyes wander skyward to that one blazing circle that needs no priest to interpret, the sun itself. You picture him squinting, probably regretting the lack of sunglasses in the 14th century BCE, but also feeling something different, something radical: clarity. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Artists later carved Amenhotep IV with odd proportions: slender limbs, full lips, wide hips. So much so that modern scholars debate whether he had some medical condition, a hormonal imbalance, or just a deliberate propaganda style meant to make him look otherworldly. The statues almost look like caricatures, a kind of ancient meme carved in stone. You can imagine teenage Amenhotep chuckling at how history would one day roast his profile. But beneath the eyeliner and peculiar portraits is a restlessness. You sense it when he stands in temple courts, watching the endless rituals to Amun drag on like the world's slowest loading YouTube video. Sacrifices, chants, scribes tallying donations. It's holy bureaucracy at its finest, and he isn't buying it. Shadows lengthen across pylons as Amenhotep mutters under his breath, and you realize he's looking for something simpler, not hundreds of gods with messy personalities, but one radiant force that no one can monopolize. Historians still argue whether his unease came from genuine spirituality or cold politics. Was Amenhotep a visionary who really believed in a universal truth, or was he a savvy operator trying to cut the legs out from under Amen's fat, powerful priesthood? Maybe both. After all, nothing says New World Order like dethroning an entire pantheon with a single sunbeam. For now, though, he plays along. You walk with him during festivals, watching as bulls are slaughtered in Amun's name, watching him smile politely as priests slip into shadowed sanctuaries that even pharaohs aren't allowed to enter. That's the thing. Imagine being king of the most powerful empire around and still getting told, "Sorry, this room's for Amun only." It must sting. He gazes at the hieroglyphs wrapping temple walls like snakes, every inch filled with divine squabbles, while the real sun outside burns brighter than any painted falcon. Thebes hums with life. Along the Nile, farmers scoop water with shadufs, lifting the river into irrigation channels. Children splash, chasing skinny cattle. Women haggle in markets, swapping onions for linen, while men haul stones to raise new pylons in Amun's honor. Yet through it all, you keep glancing back at the young prince. His mind isn't in the dust and chatter. It's fixed on the heavens. And somewhere in that gaze is a spark of rebellion. You catch him one evening on the palace balcony. The sun dips low, gilding the river like molten bronze. He lifts his hand toward it, fingers spread as though trying to catch the rays. The light dances between his knuckles, warm and absolute. In that moment, you feel it, the birth of an idea that will one day topple gods. The air is thick, cicadas whining in the reeds, but his thoughts cut sharp. What if all this noise, hawks, jackals, crocodiles, could be silenced by a single blazing truth? And so the days of Thebes roll on, priests pocketing donations, festivals blazing with music and incense. But the young Amenhotep, standing in his father's long shadow, whispers to himself about a 10, the disk of the sun. No feathers, no falcon wings, no hidden sanctuaries, just light, reaching everyone equally. The idea is still a seed, but you feel it pressing against the soil of tradition, eager to break through. The city doesn't notice yet. Children laugh in alleys, jugglers tumble in markets, donkeys bray under sacks of grain. But you, trailing behind Amenhotep, sense the weight of what's coming. Thebes is about to learn what happens when a prince decides the universe doesn't need a crowd of gods, only a single sun. You wake to a blaze of sunlight pouring through high palace windows, and Amenhotep IV, now pharaoh in his own right, paces barefoot across cool limestone floors. His crown glitters, his stride uneven, his mind electric. This isn't the young prince trailing behind priests anymore. He has the throne, the authority, and, most dangerously, an idea. A single sun disk to replace an entire pantheon. You watch him pause at a window, the Nile shimmering below, and whisper to himself, not the names of hundreds of gods, but just one, Aten. Thebes, however, is not ready. You step into Karnak's vast temple complex, where walls tower with the images of Amun's glory, painted and gilded until your eyes ache. Priests march in processions longer than some people's lifespans, their chants echoing like endless background music. Grain, wine, cattle, all flowing like a subscription service that never cancels. Mainstream fact here. The cult of Amun by this time controlled enormous estates, fleets of ships, and thousands of staff. The temple's wealth rivaled, and in some ways exceeded, the crown's. Imagine Amazon mixed with a megachurch, but with way more incense and goat sacrifices. Amenhotep knows this. He knows the priests are more than spiritual guides, they're political kingmakers. Every offering slipped into their coffers tightens their grip. You can almost see him grinding his teeth at the endless parade of gifts, the crowds bowing more to Amun's priests than to their own pharaoh. And in that grinding, a plan sharpens. He starts small. At first you see hymns appear, not to Amun, not to Osiris, not to any falcon-headed figure, but to Aten, the visible sun. These hymns gush with poetry, rays stretching like arms, touching every creature, blessing each harvest. They're sung in courtyards soft enough not to spark riots, but loud enough to plant doubt. The sun doesn't hide in dark temples. It shines in plain sight, a god that needs no middleman. And then comes the architectural mic drop. You follow Amenhotep as he orders open-air temples built for a 10, with no roofs, no shadowy sanctuaries. Straight-on sunlight floods the altars. Priests accustomed to torchlight squint in disbelief. This is worship stripped down, literally. No dark chambers, no elaborate cloaks. It's just the sun hammering down on everyone equally. He's not just founding a cult, he's designing a whole vibe shift. A quirky tidbit, the art of this new Aten faith flips everything on its head. You see wall carvings where the pharaoh and his family appear in everyday tenderness, playing with daughters, kissing under Aten's rays, lounging casually. Compare that to the stiff, robotic poses of older gods and kings, and it feels almost like a sitcom cameo. It's the first time you see royalty drawn as people with messy hair and affectionate smiles, like ancient paparazzi shots carved in stone. But don't be fooled by the soft family portraits. There's steel underneath. Amenhotep renames himself Akhenaten, effective for the Aten. You feel the weight of the syllables as they echo in palace halls. A declaration that this isn't a side hobby anymore. This is regime change. Historians still argue whether Akhenaten truly believed in Aten's supremacy or whether this was the ultimate political gambit to smash the overmighty Amun priesthood. Was he a visionary prophet or a crafty despot rebranding God for his own control? Both sides make convincing cases. You watch his courtiers nod with nervous smiles, each secretly calculating whether to ride the sunbeam revolution or cling to the shadowy temples of old. The mood in Thebes shifts. Markets still bustle, children still chase goats, but whispers creep through the alleys. You overhear a baker mutter, "Did you hear? The pharaoh banned Amun's name from the inscriptions." And indeed, stone carvers begin chiseling out Amun's name wherever it appears, leaving blank scars in sacred walls. Entire hymns are mutilated. It's like watching someone rage delete a whole hard drive of divine files. Priests protest, of course. You can almost see their indignant scrolls piling up, complaints that their god is being erased, their livelihoods shredded. Yet Akhenaten doesn't back down. In fact, he pushes harder. Offerings are redirected from Amun's sprawling estates to Aten's new altars. Processions once dedicated to the hidden god now celebrate the radiant disk. At noon, when the sun burns overhead, sacrifices are lifted into open air. No secret rituals, no dark cloisters, just blinding light. And here's where you feel the tension thick as summer dust. Farmers are confused. Do they honor the old gods who've blessed their fields for centuries? Or this new sun cult their pharaoh demands? Merchants hedge bets, keeping tiny amulets of Bez and Hathor under their robes while mouthing Aten's hymns in public. You notice people smiling politely during Aten prayers, then sneaking offerings at night to Osiris, just in case. Old habits die hard, especially when eternal salvation is on the line. Akhenaten notices too. His solution? He dreams of a fresh start, a whole new capital untouched by Amun's shadow. His gaze drifts eastward, to an empty stretch of desert where cliffs cradle the horizon. One day he points, and you hear his decree, "Here we will build Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten." It's not just a city, it's a statement, a nuclear break from Thebes and its suffocating priesthood. But that, my friend, is still on the horizon. For now, the tension in Thebes crackles. At noon, you watch shadows vanish, sticks planted upright in the sand erasing themselves, just like Amun's name chiseled from the walls. The pharaoh paces under the sun disk, convinced he's right, and you wonder whether the people around him see a visionary or a madman. Either way, the age of many gods is shrinking, and the sun alone is rising to swallow their light. You find yourself trudging across the desert, sandals filling with hot sand, as a caravan of laborers, scribes, and overseers winds its way toward a barren crescent between cliffs in the Nile. Akhenaten rides ahead, his eyes gleaming like a man who has glimpsed destiny carved into the horizon. This is the spot. No temples of Amun, no memories of rival priests, just raw desert waiting to be transformed. He declares it Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten, and immediately the air hums with the feverish promise of construction. Stakes are driven, rope lines stretched, clay tablets marked. Before your eyes, thousands of workers hack at limestone, raising pylons and laying mud brick walls. Dust clouds blur the sunlight, but Aten's rays seem to bless every swing of the hammer. This isn't just city building. It feels like watching an empire reboot its operating system in real time. Streets are straight and wide, temples open to the sky, no dark sanctuaries anywhere. And at the heart of it all, a massive great temple of Aten spreads like an unfolded scroll. Long courtyards, open colonnades, altars drenched in sunlight. Mainstream fact: archaeologists today can still trace the outlines of Akhetaten at a site now called Amarna. They've uncovered foundations of palaces, workshops, and homes, showing how rapidly this city was planned and built. Imagine a metropolis rising in under a decade, carved out of nothing but desert sand. It's urban speed building that would make even modern developers sweat. You walk through its streets as artisans paint walls in bright reds, blues, and yellows, not of jackal-headed gods or feather-crowned deities, but of the sun disk Aten, rays ending in delicate hands, each extending ankhs, the symbol of life, down toward the royal family. These aren't anonymous priests mediating for the people. It's Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters receiving blessings directly from the sun. Everyone else is an audience, watching from the sidelines. A quirky tidbit: you catch sight of the royal daughters depicted in murals with odd, oversized heads and spindly bodies, playing with pets or clambering onto their parents' laps. Some scholars say this exaggerated art style was symbolic, a way to break from tradition and emphasize divine uniqueness. Others joke it looks like the world's first cartoon caricature family portrait. You can almost hear the little princesses whining, "But Dad, why do I look like a lima bean with arms?" Still, not everything in Akhetaten is radiant. Supplies must be hauled in from miles away. The desert sun spares no one. Workers faint, overseers shout, food spoils. You notice makeshift huts springing up around the city, the rough edges behind the glossy propaganda. Families cram into tiny rooms, scratching Aten hymns onto plaster walls, alongside doodles of old gods they're technically not supposed to remember. The dream is shiny, but the daily grind is still brutal. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptians ever truly accepted Aten as their sole god. Was the city of Akhetaten a genuine hub of devotion, or just a forced stage play where citizens mouthed the right hymns to keep their rations? The silence of the common people in the records leaves you guessing. You picture a farmer grumbling, "Sure, Aten's great, but will he fix my broken plow?" Inside the royal palace, though, confidence beams. You watch Akhenaten and Nefertiti walk hand in hand beneath Aten's rays, their children skipping beside them, the royal family basking in a new kind of intimacy. No pharaoh before had been shown this human, this vulnerable. They lean close, share fruit at banquets, stroke the cheeks of daughters. It's propaganda, yes, but strangely disarming. You almost forget these are rulers who've erased a thousand-year pantheon. Then there's Nefertiti herself, tall and elegant, her teal and saffron robes catching the sun. She isn't a background figure. She's everywhere, nearly co-equal with Akhenaten in inscriptions, standing with him before Aten, offering libations, raising her arms in devotion. You get the sense she's not just supporting the revolution, she's co-directing it. Imagine a pharaonic power couple branding themselves as the sun's chosen spokespeople, with Aten as their exclusive sponsor. Walk further into Akhetaten, and you see workshops churning with activity, jewelers stringing beads, potters shaping amphorae, Scribes tallying rations on ostrich shards. Daily life thrums along, the ordinary buzzing beneath the extraordinary. Children chase each other with sticks, donkeys bray in alleys, and vendors shout over baskets of onions and fish. In the glow of a tin, life is still life, messy, loud, unglamorous. And yet step back, and the city hums with a strange energy. Every wall, every altar, every hymn points to one shining truth. A 10 reigns supreme. The priests of Amun are far away in Thebes, fuming. But here in Akhetaten, the sun rules undisputed. The experiment feels complete. But as you linger, shadows creep in. Ironic, given A10's obsession with light. Whispers ripple through the streets that crops are failing in outer provinces, that the treasury strains under temple building costs, that foreign envoys leave unsatisfied. The city glows, yes, but cracks line its foundations. You can almost feel the heat turning oppressive, like a spotlight too bright, burning instead of blessing. Akhenaten doesn't notice, or refuses to. He lifts his face daily to Aten, arms outstretched, lips chanting hymns, and you're left wondering, is this a man touched by divine revelation, or one blinded by his own reflection in the sun? Either way, the horizon of Aten rises before you, brilliant, bizarre, and fragile as glass. The desert light slants differently now, softer, as if even the sun hesitates to commit to Aten's singular reign. You trail behind Akhenaten through Akhetaten's wide avenues, past murals glowing with Aten's rays, past courtyards where incense smokes upward into empty sky. Yet beneath the gilded hymns and polished courtyards, the city feels unsettled, like a lute strung too tightly. People go about their routines, but there's a stiffness to it, a sense that no one quite trusts how long this experiment will last. Inside the palace, though, the atmosphere glows almost theatrically. Banquets unfurl with golden trays of roasted duck, bowls of figs, goblets of wine pressed from Nileside vineyards. Musicians pluck lyres, flutes trill, dancers weave in saffron veils, all beneath open roofs where Aten's rays are invited to pour directly in. Akhenaten sits at the head of the feast, Nefertiti at his side, their daughters darting about the banquet like mischievous sparks of laughter. They raise their arms in ritual salutes, reciting hymns aloud even as grease from roasted goose slicks their fingers. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have uncovered hymn fragments from Akhetaten, praising Aten in verses that sound startlingly like early monotheistic prayers. You rise in perfection on the horizon of the sky, the texts proclaim, words that would later echo strangely in the cadences of other great religions. You can almost hear the chanting between gulps of pomegranate wine. But the art, oh, the art is stranger still. You wander through chamber after chamber painted with elongated heads, drooping bellies, and almost alien-like limbs. Akhenaten is shown with sloping shoulders and thick thighs, Nefertiti with exaggerated elegance, their children like delicate marionettes. Some scholars believe it's deliberate symbolism, a way to show the family as both human and divine, stretching beyond mortal forms. Others whisper that it might reflect a genuine genetic disorder or health condition in the royal bloodline. Whatever the truth, the murals leave you blinking. It feels like you've stepped into the first surrealist gallery, only with sandstone walls instead of oil canvases. A quirky tidbit, one ostracon, a shard of limestone used for sketches, from Amarna shows a doodle of a fat-bellied man with exaggerated features, likely a lampoon of the king himself. Yes, even in ancient Egypt, someone snuck a little workplace satire onto the margins of history. You almost picture a laborer elbowing his friend. Don't tell the Pharaoh, but look, here's how he looks when he's yelling at the sun again. Despite the spectacle, the world beyond Akhetaten grows restless. Letters from vassal states arrive, clay tablets inked with desperate pleas. Send troops, send gold, send grain. Foreign princes complain of raids, of crumbling alliances, of feeling abandoned, while Egypt pours its strength into Aten's monuments. You imagine a messenger, sweat dripping onto the tablet, muttering, "Seriously, while you're busy singing to the sun, we're losing cities out here." Historians still argue whether Akhenaten truly ignored these diplomatic cries or whether his officials simply failed to act. What's clear is that Egypt's once iron grip on its empire began to loosen. Borders trembled while the pharaoh lifted hymns skyward. And in a cruel twist, the sun he worshipped became the very thing to betray him. Droughts and failed harvests struck the land, grain supplies dwindled, and famine cast its long shadow. You pass through the poorer quarters of Akhetaten, where the songs of Aten are whispered less fervently. Children's ribs show through their skin. Women grind grain with tired arms. Men haul water in clay jars that chip under the strain. In these cramped homes, tucked behind the grand avenues, scraps of amulets appear. Tiny carvings of Bez, the household god, or Taweret, the hippo goddess of childbirth. Symbols Akhenaten supposedly erased still flicker like embers among the common folk. Faith, after all, is stubborn. Inside the palace, Akhenaten seems unbothered, or perhaps blinded. He writes hymns, delivers speeches, and strolls with Nefertiti through columned courtyards, his lips forever tilted upward toward a 10. Yet cracks creep even into this golden bubble. Rumors swirl about whether Nefertiti's power grows too strong, whether she briefly reigned as co-regent, whether her name was deliberately erased from certain inscriptions later. You see her gaze, calm, poised, maybe calculating, and wonder if she foresaw the fragility of this entire experiment. The banquets continue, the murals multiply, the city hums, but you feel the undertow pulling stronger. Merchants complain of empty markets, soldiers grumble without pay, priests in Thebes seethe quietly, plotting. The pharaoh dines beneath Aten's rays while somewhere beyond the horizon, Egypt's empire unravels thread by thread. And in this golden yet precarious glow, you realize Akhetaten is less a permanent capital than a brilliant fever dream. It shines, burns hot, and leaves everyone wondering how long before the sun's embrace becomes a sunburn too fierce to endure. The desert cool deepens now, a soft blue twilight settling over Akhetaten's limestone walls. You wander the wide avenues again, but the bustle has dulled. Fewer vendors call out, fewer hymns echo in courtyards, and shadows stretch longer across half-finished stone blocks. It's as if Aten himself has started to dim, withdrawing those golden rays that once lit every fresco. You sense it. The city is hollowing out, its pulse weakening with each passing season. Akhenaten walks slower these days, his once fervent eyes grown weary. His family, too, seems frayed by loss. Daughters gone too soon, names scraped from walls. The joyful processions of earlier years replaced by hushed whispers. You catch the glimmer of something in his expression. Was it doubt? Or perhaps only exhaustion from holding up a sun disk alone against the tide of centuries of tradition? Mainstream fact. After Akhenaten's death, his successors wasted no time dismantling his revolution. The court abandoned Akhetaten, temples crumbled, statues were smashed, and Aten's name was chiseled away as though it had never existed. The old gods surged back, triumphant, their cults restored in Thebes and Memphis, as if the Amarna period was just a strange dream the kingdom preferred to forget. Still, the debates remain. Historians argue whether Akhenaten's revolution planted a seed for later monotheistic traditions, or whether it was simply a one-man obsession doomed to collapse. Was he a prophet of an idea too early for its time, or merely a reckless monarch who alienated his people with theological experiments? You feel the tug of both arguments, like a rope stretched taut across centuries. A quirky tidbit: one legend claims Akhenaten's body was so despised that priests tore it apart and scattered the pieces, so no grave could honor him. Another says his mummy was quietly tucked away, only to vanish without trace. Imagine the grim cosmic irony. Here's a man who wanted Aten to shine on him forever, yet his body itself may have been denied even a shadow. You drift into the chamber where his final hours might have played out. The palace is quieter, the air cooler. A few servants shuffle in with bowls of water and bread, though some whisper that, in the end, he may have refused even food, retreating into silence like so many rulers worn down by the weight of their crowns. Perhaps Nefertiti, perhaps a child sat nearby in those last moments. Or perhaps he died alone, his thoughts still chasing Aten's rays across the ceiling. The silence after his death feels immense. Akhenaten begins to crumble quickly, like a sandcastle left at low tide. Workers abandon their tools, markets empty, roofs cave in, sand drifts over the once grand streets, swallowing broken stelae and toppled statues. The city fades, returning to dust as if Aten's great experiment never existed. Only fragments remain for archaeologists to unearth millennia later. Bits of pottery, hymn inscriptions, half-finished walls. Yet outside these ruins, life barrels forward. A young boy ascends the throne, Tutankhaten, soon renamed Tutankhamun. His advisors waste no time undoing Akhenaten's decrees, restoring the temples, renaming the gods, soothing the priests. The pendulum swings back, and Aten becomes a taboo, a hushed joke. You almost hear the sigh of relief across Egypt. The sun still shines, but now it's just one among many divine forces again. And yet, as you stand in the abandoned courtyards, you feel something uncanny. The murals of Aten's rays, though fading, still glow faintly in twilight. The shapes of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, elongated and strange, linger like ghosts of an idea that refused to die entirely. It's haunting, because even erased gods can leave echoes, faint ripples through history. Modern scholars and dreamers alike still wrestle with his story. Some see him as a tyrant who gutted Egypt's traditions, others as a visionary whose devotion to one god reshaped how humans could even imagine the divine. You look up at the evening sky, where the stars scatter like 1,000 forgotten deities, while the sun, already set, waits to return tomorrow. Maybe Akhenaten wasn't wrong about Aten's power. Maybe he just chose too small a stage, or too fragile a people, for such a seismic idea. The desert wind brushes your cheek. You lie back on the warm stone, gazing at constellations Egyptians once revered as gods. Orion, Sirius, the endless river of the Milky Way. The irony bites gently. Akhenaten tried to erase them, yet here they are, still glowing, still unshaken. But then again, so is the sun, rising each morning as if Aten had never lost. And as sleep tugs at your eyelids, you let the story close around you like sand covering a buried city. The gods return, Aten recedes, but the memory of one man's audacious gamble flickers in the quiet. You are small beneath the heavens, yes, but in that smallness, you share the same human spark that once looked up and dared to say, one sun is enough. We find ourselves standing in the heart of Alexandria, where the smell of salt water lingers in the air, and the soft glow of lanterns flicker through narrow cobblestone streets. The year is somewhere between 300 and 200 BCE. Don't worry, you won't need to remember that. You're walking towards the grandest vision the ancient world has ever seen, and it's alive with ambition. The Library of Alexandria, a place like no other, is about to make history, but not in the way anyone expects. You can almost hear the whispers of scrolls unraveling in the minds of the brightest thinkers. Somewhere within the walls, a mystery is taking shape, a mystery that centuries later will still leave us wondering how much was lost and what secrets still remain hidden in the ashes. As you wander into the city's library district, you're stepping onto the soil of the greatest intellectual experiment of its time. Alexandria, Egypt, the crossroads of knowledge, commerce, and culture. In the 3rd century BCE, Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was the hub of the Mediterranean world, under the reign of the Ptolemies, whose rulers considered themselves heirs to Alexander the Great's vision of a united, intellectually advanced empire. But they didn't just inherit military power. They inherited something even more ambitious, the idea of creating a central archive of human knowledge. It's here that the Library of Alexandria would rise, an institution destined to become both a beacon of enlightenment and a symbol of tragic loss. Historians often argue over how exactly the library came into being. Some say it was established by Ptolemy the Fern Soter, while others argue that it was his successor, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who truly brought it to life. Regardless of who kicked it off, one thing is certain: it was a massive undertaking. The library was housed in the Mausoleum, a temple to the Muses, and it was much more than just a building. The Ptolemies set out to gather all the known texts from across the ancient world. Scrolls from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond were collected, copied, and stored in the hopes of creating an intellectual repository that would be unrivaled. In fact, they even sent agents to Athens to borrow books from the greatest scholars of the day, sometimes with no intention of ever returning them. Talk about an ancient version of book hoarding. But what made the library so extraordinary wasn't just the quantity of scrolls, it was the scope. The idea was audacious: to create a compendium of all human knowledge, from science and philosophy to history and poetry. The founders believed that if they could gather every known text and preserve it, humanity would have access to the collective wisdom of the ages, free from the limitations of time and space. It's hard not to imagine the dreamers, scribes, and scholars who worked tirelessly within these walls, staring at the scrolls and thinking, if only we had the wisdom to hold on to it all. Historians still argue whether the library was a one-of-a-kind place, or if Alexandria's scholars were more focused on their intellectual pursuits than actual preservation. Regardless, you can't deny that, at its peak, the library was the most ambitious attempt in history to catalog the very essence of human thought. But it wasn't just the books themselves that made Alexandria a center of knowledge. It was the scholars who made this dream real. They had no fear in questioning the world around them, using the texts from across the known world as their guide. The library wasn't just a place to read. It was a place to think, to challenge, to discover. But as you stroll through Alexandria, in the shadows of this magnificent library, there's a question tugging at your mind. What did they actually know that we don't? What secrets were hidden in those scrolls? Maybe even deliberately so. The more you think about it, the more you wonder. Was the library truly a center of knowledge? Or did it harbor information far too dangerous for its time? That's something we'll explore as the story unfolds. As the sun dips low over Alexandria, a soft golden glow floods the city streets, and you find yourself stepping into the heart of the library. You can hear the soft rustle of papyrus scrolls, the murmur of scholars debating the latest theories, the clink of ink jars being opened, and the quick scratch of quills on parchment. The library isn't just a collection of books. It's a living, breathing organism where knowledge is constantly being shared, reinterpreted, and built upon. But what were those scrolls really about? What hidden secrets did they contain? Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria truly housed all the knowledge of the world, but we know for certain it was home to some of the most groundbreaking works of its time. Many of the scrolls were dedicated to the sciences: mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering. The library was a hub for intellectual exchange, and its scholars weren't just reading old texts, they were pushing the boundaries of understanding. Perhaps most famously, Euclid worked here, solidifying the foundations of geometry. You can almost hear him in the background now, scribbling equations in the dimly lit corners of the library, hoping to create a system that would stand the test of time. Alongside him was Archimedes, known for his principle of buoyancy and contributions to physics, both of which are still taught today. These men didn't just copy old ideas, they built new ones, creating concepts that would define the ancient world and still influence our world. The library wasn't just a place to collect knowledge. It was a laboratory of ideas. But beyond the famous names, there were many other hidden gems in the library's vast collection. Think about the scrolls of lost works that are long gone now. There was surely poetry, perhaps even the lost epic of Homer's Iliad in its original form, not the versions we read today. Imagine standing next to those ancient manuscripts, the scent of ink and papyrus mixing with the salty air from the nearby Mediterranean. You'd find works on philosophy, history, and the esoteric arts that stretch the boundaries of what we know about the ancient world. Some of these scrolls may have contained ideas so radical or dangerous that they were hidden away, carefully preserved for only the most trusted of scholars, and yet many of them vanished without a trace. One particularly intriguing part of the library's collection was the so-called scientific knowledge of the time. It's easy to imagine that among the many scrolls, there were works on subjects we today would consider lost knowledge or even pseudoscience. The Greeks and Egyptians were constantly experimenting with the natural world in ways that seem almost magical to us now. Alchemy, early theories of the human body, and even what we might consider the beginnings of psychology. But here's where things get interesting. We have very little idea of what else might have been contained in those scrolls. What we do know is that there were many rare texts that didn't survive history's tumultuous course. Historians believe that some of these scrolls may have contained knowledge of astronomy that was far more advanced than what we give the ancients credit for, or perhaps medical techniques that were shockingly effective for their time. Some even speculate that the library might have housed ancient texts related to alchemy and the pursuit of immortality, secrets of life, death, and transformation that could change everything we know about the ancient world. Of course, these are just theories, and historians still debate whether such secrets existed or if they were simply legends made up in later centuries. Yet the mere possibility that some lost knowledge might have been hidden in the library's vast collection is enough to spark imaginations and stir up curiosity. Were there ancient healing remedies, forgotten texts on human consciousness, or even mysterious alchemical recipes for turning base metals into gold? What we do know is that there was no shortage of scholars in Alexandria eager to uncover every secret the world had to offer. Some just might have been too dangerous to share, and that's where things get tricky. If these scrolls were so important, so potentially dangerous, why didn't anyone preserve them? The mystery of the library's hidden knowledge isn't just about what was lost. It's also about the questions left unanswered by those ancient scrolls. What did the scholars of Alexandria know that we still can't even begin to understand? What did they learn, experiment with, and conceal behind locked doors? As you walk deeper into the library's halls, the sounds of debate and laughter continue to fill the air. But the question remains, what knowledge is truly lost to us now? We may never know the full answer, but the search for these secrets continues, both in dusty corners of the world and in the curiosity of scholars, dreamers, and adventurers like yourself. As the weight of the night deepens around you, a chill creeps into the air of Alexandria, as if the very city itself is beginning to sense the fate that awaits its greatest intellectual treasure. You can almost hear the crackle of parchment in the background, the faint murmur of worried whispers. Scholars discussing the most recent tragedy to strike the library. The truth is, it didn't happen in one devastating event. The Library of Alexandria didn't burn down in a single day. Instead, it was a slow and painful decline, punctuated by a series of fires, invasions, and shifting political tides. Historians still argue about how many times the library burned. One of the earliest and most significant fires occurred in 48 BCE during Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria. The city was embroiled in a civil war, and Caesar's fleet accidentally set the library ablaze when they were forced to dock nearby. Ancient accounts are murky on the exact details, but many historians believe that the main library was destroyed, along with a significant portion of its scrolls. The fire of 48 BCE is often blamed for destroying a treasure trove of knowledge, but some scholars argue that much of the library's collection had already been lost by then. Caesar's fire may have been a tragic catalyst, but it wasn't the end of the story. The library's suffering didn't stop with Caesar's forces. As the years wore on, the city's political landscape shifted dramatically. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had originally supported the library's grand vision, eventually lost its grip on Alexandria. The rise of Christianity in the 4th century CE marked another blow. The Roman Emperor Theodosius the Cerphorant keen on eradicating pagan practices, issued a decree in 391 CE that led to the destruction of temples and libraries associated with polytheism. Many believe that, during this time, the remnants of the library, if they hadn't already been destroyed, were finally lost. Some even claim that the final pieces of the library's collection were burned in a Christian-led purge, extinguishing the last traces of its existence. It's hard not to feel the weight of loss as you stand in the shadow of Alexandria's ancient ruins. How much of the library was actually destroyed during these fires? Was it truly the all-consuming blaze we imagine, or was it a slow erosion, like the gradual crumbling of a once great civilization? Some scholars believe that the library's collection was spread out over various locations, from the main building to its satellite locations, and that not everything was burned. But the loss of the library remains one of the greatest tragedies of the ancient world. Even if some scrolls survived, many believe that much of its knowledge has been permanently erased from human memory. Yet there's something else we must consider. Were the fires truly the greatest threat to the library's survival? We tend to think of fires as the ultimate destroyers, but in reality, it may have been the passage of time, the decay of ancient materials, and the shifting tides of political power that ultimately sealed the library's fate. It's a strange thought, isn't it, that something as simple as time could have been the greatest enemy to the world's most ambitious collection of knowledge. Historians still argue whether the library's destruction was inevitable. Did it suffer from a string of bad luck? Or was its demise a natural consequence of its immense size and scope? Some even speculate that the library's existence may have been threatened by its very success. With so much knowledge being gathered in one place, wasn't it bound to attract the attention of those who sought to control it? It's easy to get caught up in the idea that a single catastrophic event could explain the loss of the library, but the truth may be far more complicated. Maybe it wasn't a single fire that wiped out all those scrolls. Maybe it was a series of misfortunes, each one chipping away at the library's grandeur until nothing was left but fragments. As you walk through the ruins of Alexandria, it's hard not to wonder how much of that knowledge was lost and how much was simply hidden, waiting to be rediscovered by those daring enough to search for it. In the end, it wasn't just fire that brought down the library. It was a combination of time, politics, and maybe, just maybe, a few too many secrets left behind in those dark, dusty corners. And while we'll never know the full extent of what was lost, the myth of the Library of Alexandria lives on, as tantalizing and elusive as the scrolls it once held. Perhaps that's its greatest legacy, the reminder that some things are meant to be hidden, lost to time, but never forgotten. The fire has burned, the scrolls have crumbled to ash, but the story of what was lost in Alexandria's library is far from over. Now, as you stand among the ruins, the weight of centuries presses in, but so does a sense of possibility. There are those who believe the loss of the library wasn't just a tragedy, it was a cover-up. In whispers, the theory grows louder. What if the Library of Alexandria held knowledge so powerful, so dangerous, that its destruction wasn't merely an accident or the result of war and politics, but a calculated effort to keep certain secrets buried forever? Historians still argue over this idea. Were the contents of the library truly world-changing, holding information that could have rewritten history? The fringe theories are as tantalizing as they are speculative. Some suggest that the library housed ancient manuscripts that contained the secrets of advanced technologies, mechanical devices, engineering marvels, and even the knowledge of how to harness electricity centuries before it was ever discovered. Others speculate that the library was home to esoteric knowledge that could have altered the course of religion, science, or politics. But is it all just romantic imagination, or is there something more to these theories? One of the most fascinating theories revolves around the idea that the library held knowledge of lost technologies, those great scientific advances that have mysteriously disappeared from the historical record. Some believe the library may have preserved detailed descriptions of ancient inventions, like the Antikythera mechanism an astronomical computer discovered off the coast of Greece. This device, dating to around 100 BCE, is a complex set of gears that was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. While we have no evidence it was in the Library of Alexandria, some argue that it's the type of artifact that could have found its home there, representing an understanding of engineering far ahead of its time. What if the library contained even more? Historians have long debated whether the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, or others had access to technologies lost to history, like sophisticated methods of construction that would explain the pyramids or even the lost city of Atlantis, a place that some believe might have held knowledge of advanced physics or alternative energy sources. Could these secrets have been hidden away, only to be destroyed by those who feared their potential? It's an intriguing thought, isn't it? That the very idea of preserving knowledge could have been at odds with the desire to maintain control over it. But the most controversial and perhaps the most compelling theory revolves around the possibility that the library held religious or philosophical texts so dangerous they had to be destroyed. These weren't your ordinary scrolls. These were documents that questioned the very nature of the gods, the structure of the universe, and the origins of humanity. Perhaps these writings contained radical ideas about free will, the afterlife, or the nature of the soul. What if the library housed ancient versions of texts that challenged the power structures of the time? Did early religious or political figures see these writings as a threat and therefore erase them from history? One of the most persistent ideas in this vein is the possibility that the library contained lost Gnostic texts, early Christian writings that were later deemed heretical by Orthodox Christianity. These Gnostic Gospels, which explored alternative versions of Christian teachings, might have been among the books destroyed to preserve the dominant religious narratives. If that were the case, the library would have held secrets not just about the material world, but also about the divine. What if some of the very ideas we consider sacred were once part of a wider, forgotten conversation? These theories, however, raise more questions than answers. Were the texts of Alexandria truly so powerful? Historians still argue over the true nature of what was housed there. Some suggest that the idea of the library as a repository of radical or dangerous knowledge is a modern myth, created centuries after its destruction, and that the library may have simply been a scholarly institution filled with the best available works of its time. But the possibility of something more, a conspiracy of knowledge suppression, or simply a failure to preserve what mattered most, remains tantalizing. It's easy to imagine that by now the knowledge hidden in the library's ashes has long faded from human memory. Yet in every ancient manuscript we uncover, in every forgotten piece of knowledge we rediscover, the legend of the Library of Alexandria lives on. It's not just about what we lost. It's about what still remains hidden, waiting to be found. As the darkness of night deepens over Alexandria's ruins, a quiet hum seems to echo through time, as if the long-lost knowledge of the library still lingers somewhere in the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, it's not entirely gone. Despite centuries of destruction and neglect, the legacy of the library continues to haunt us in ways we can't fully explain. The stories of its secrets, its knowledge, and its lost treasures are woven into the very fabric of modern intellectual pursuits. The idea of what might have been kept hidden there, what might still be out there, drives us to continue seeking the fragments of that lost world. The library's influence has not only inspired modern scholars, but it has also shaped our ideas of what knowledge should be. Its legacy is visible in the grand institutions we've built today. Libraries, universities, and museums, all dedicated to preserving knowledge for the future. In a sense, the library's tragic end didn't mark the end of its mission. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one that we're still writing. Every time we uncover a new ancient manuscript, every time we dig through the dusty archives of forgotten civilizations, we're adding to the ongoing story that the Library of Alexandria once started. Yet, it's not just the academic world that continues to search for the library's lost treasures. The fascination with Alexandria's secrets has seeped into the popular imagination as well. Think about all the adventure stories and mystery novels that revolve around the idea of lost knowledge. Stories that often use the Library of Alexandria as their starting point. From Indiana Jones to the Da Vinci Code, the quest for forgotten truths continues to captivate us. This longing for the lost knowledge of Alexandria, for the discovery of secrets that could change the way we understand our world, still drives explorers, historians, and even treasure hunters to this day. And while we may never uncover the full extent of what was lost in Alexandria's great library, there's something beautiful about that mystery. It keeps us dreaming, keeps us searching, and reminds us of our own capacity for discovery. After all, who's to say that some of the greatest secrets of the ancient world haven't been waiting to be unearthed for centuries? Who's to say there aren't fragments of that long-lost knowledge buried in obscure libraries or hidden in archives that haven't yet been explored? The hunt for the library's lost secrets has become more than just an intellectual pursuit. It has become a metaphor for humanity's eternal quest for truth, understanding, and self-discovery. Every time a new discovery is made, whether it's a forgotten manuscript in a remote monastery or a groundbreaking theory about ancient technologies, we're reminded of the library's unfinished mission. Maybe in some way, the Library of Alexandria isn't just a place in the past. Maybe it's a beacon that still shines, calling us toward the next great revelation. So what is the real legacy of the library? Is it the knowledge it contained or the enduring spirit of discovery that it inspired? Historians still argue whether we'll ever know the full truth about the library's lost contents. Some believe that the answers are hidden away in private collections, in dusty archives, or in the remains of ancient temples scattered across the Mediterranean. Others think that the secrets of Alexandria may have been lost forever, swallowed by time and fire. But perhaps the greatest secret of the library isn't in the scrolls themselves. Perhaps it's in the knowledge that we are still searching. And in that search, we honor the memory of the library's dream, one of a world united by knowledge, where wisdom is preserved, shared, and passed down across generations. The Library of Alexandria may have been destroyed, but its spirit continues to live on, in every book, in every scroll, in every person who continues to believe that knowledge is worth preserving. It lives on in the restless curiosity that stirs within us as we turn the pages of history, searching for the lost treasures of the past. Now, as you look out over the ruins of Alexandria, you realize that the journey isn't over. The lost knowledge of the library may still be out there, waiting to be rediscovered. And maybe, just maybe, we're all a part of that discovery. We find ourselves standing on the edge of a kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse. The air around you crackles with tension as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the land. You can hear the distant hum of warriors sharpening their weapons, the rhythm of their preparations like the pulse of a beast about to charge into battle. This is no ordinary conflict. The stakes are high. The kingdom, once a proud and prosperous land, is now surrounded by enemies who see its fall as inevitable. But the warriors, with their swords and shields gleaming in the fading light, stand resolute. They know that this is a fight for survival. The battle they're about to face isn't just a fight for land. It's a fight for everything they've ever known and everything they stand to lose. You can almost taste the dust and sweat in the air, the weight of history pressing down on you as you watch them ready themselves. It's also real. The kingdom is cornered, and the warriors prepare to give their all. Some of them know they might not make it out alive, but they still march forward with their heads high, knowing that if they fall, they will fall with honor. It's the kind of battle that will be remembered in songs and stories for generations to come. They are about to face an overwhelming force, and the odds? Well, they're not in their favor. But sometimes when history is made, it's made in the unlikeliest of places. In the midst of despair, there is always a flicker of hope, a small chance that something or someone will change the course of destiny. Historians still argue whether it was sheer determination or something far more divine that propelled these warriors forward. Some say it was their courage. Others suggest it was a higher power, an unseen force guiding their actions. Whatever it was, it's clear. This battle wasn't just any battle, and tonight you're about to find out why. So before you get comfortable, Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and the time where you're watching from. I always love to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun dips below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a deep orange glow. The warriors line up in formation, their faces shadowed, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the drum beats that echo across the plains. It's in this moment of quiet before the storm that something happens. At first, it's nothing more than a flicker in the sky, so faint that, had you blinked, you might have missed it. But then, as if the heavens themselves are writing something in the stars, a streak of bright light cuts through the darkness. A star, so radiant it almost seems unnatural, blazes across the sky, trailing a long, fiery tail. The warriors stop, their movements frozen for just a second, eyes lifting to the heavens. You'd think they'd be focused on the battle ahead, but this star, this blazing, otherworldly thing, pulls their attention away. They stare up, mouths agape, unsure of what they're seeing. Was it a comet, a passing meteor, or was it something else entirely? Some speak in hushed tones, suggesting it's a sign from the gods themselves. A star to lead us to victory, one of the younger warriors murmurs, his voice barely audible against the rising wind. Others scoff, chalking it up to mere superstition. But you can feel the shift. It's like the air itself has changed, crackling with energy, with possibility. Historians still argue whether this star was merely a coincidence or if it truly held some celestial significance. Some scholars say it's no more than a trick of the eye, a natural phenomenon that's been glorified by the stories of those who were desperate for a sign. But then there's the feeling, the strange, undeniable feeling that this star is more than just a ball of fire in the night sky. Could it be? Could this glowing beacon truly be a harbinger of fate? The warriors, unsure of its meaning, begin to murmur among themselves. Some feel a renewed sense of purpose, while others only grow more uncertain. What does it all mean? Was this star guiding them toward their doom, or was it the divine hand of the gods telling them that victory was still within reach? The night grows colder, and the sound of the wind howling through the grass fills the silence. The star remains, bright and unyielding, hanging in the sky like an omen. The warriors, still unsure, ready themselves for the fight that is about to come. Whatever happens, they know they can't turn back. The star is there, a constant presence in the sky. And for some reason, they can't help but feel that their fate, whatever it may be, is somehow tied to it. The battle begins. The sound of metal clashing against metal fills the air, like the deafening roar of thunder. You can feel the earth shake beneath your boots as warriors charge forward, their battle cries ringing out across the plains. The star above, now higher in the sky, burns with an intensity that seems to give them strength. It's almost as if the heavens themselves are watching, guiding them, urging them on. The warriors fight with all their might, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization, honed by years of training and bloodshed. They know this battle will decide the kingdom's fate. The stakes couldn't be higher. And yet, through the chaos and carnage, there's a strange sense of calm, as if the very sky above them is watching over them. You can see the clash of spears, the sharp hiss of arrows slicing through the air, and the heavy thud of swords striking shields. The warriors fight with ferocity, knowing that their lives, their homes, and their people depend on the outcome of this battle. The enemies are many, but the warriors seem to grow stronger with every passing minute. There's a determination in their eyes, a fierce belief that the stars themselves have aligned in their favor. Perhaps it's the star in the sky, guiding them, giving them hope. Or maybe it's just their will to survive. Either way, they fight with everything they have, driven by something far beyond human strength. Historians still debate whether the star truly had any influence on the outcome of the battle, or if it was merely a symbol of hope that spurred the warriors on. Some suggest that the sight of the star simply gave them the strength to push forward, while others believe the star had a more mystical role to play. Some argue that the appearance of such an extraordinary event gave the warriors the belief that the gods themselves were watching and rooting for them. Who can say for sure? What we do know is that the warriors, against all odds, fought with a vigor that surprised even their enemies. And it wasn't long before the tide of battle began to turn. The star, still visible in the sky, continues to burn brightly, casting an ethereal light on the battlefield. With every swing of a sword, with every fallen soldier, the warriors grow more determined. The star remains a constant, unblinking presence above them, a silent witness to their struggle. And as the hours pass and the sun begins to rise, something miraculous happens. The tide of battle shifts. The warriors, once outnumbered and on the verge of defeat, are now pushing forward, gaining ground, forcing their enemies back. There's something in the air now, a sense of victory, a belief that the battle is already won. The warriors know that the star in the sky is not just a coincidence. It is a sign that victory has been written in the stars. As the battle rages on, something begins to shift in the very fabric of the conflict. The warriors, once exhausted, now feel a surge of energy coursing through them, as if the star itself is breathing life back into their tired bodies. The ground beneath them seems to quake with newfound power, their enemies faltering in the face of a force they can't comprehend. The star, high above, continues to shine brighter than ever, its light casting an otherworldly glow across the battlefield. For every warrior that falls, two more rise to take their place. It's as if the heavens themselves have opened up and poured their might into these fighters, infusing them with strength, courage, and an undeniable sense of destiny. The enemy, once so confident in their victory, now begins to crumble under the weight of their own doubt. The warriors' charge is relentless, their hearts pounding with the rhythm of victory that seems almost preordained. The star continues to burn in the sky, unblinking, as if guiding them every step of the way. Even in the midst of the chaos, of the cries of the fallen, the clash of iron and steel, the warriors press forward. The light of the star reflects in their eyes, a beacon that guides them toward a fate they can't escape. It's as though, with every stroke of their swords and every shield raised, they are not just fighting for survival, but for something much larger, something written in the stars themselves. Historians still debate whether the star was a mere coincidence or if its appearance had some mystical influence on the warriors' determination. Some say the warriors were simply driven by the belief that their victory had already been written, that the star was a symbol of their unshakable faith. Others argue that the star acted as a spiritual guide, fueling the warriors with a divine power that allowed them to overcome overwhelming odds. Whatever the reason, there's no denying the impact it had. The star remained a constant source of inspiration as the tide of battle shifted in the kingdom's favor. By the time the battle finally subsides, the landscape is a scene of victory. The warriors stand, breathless and covered in sweat, their bodies aching but their spirits soaring. The once dominant enemy has been pushed back, their forces scattered, broken by the unyielding force of the kingdom's defenders. The star, having guided them through the night, begins to fade as the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon. The warriors, standing victorious, look up to the sky one last time. The star has fulfilled its promise. The kingdom is saved. The sky above them, once dark and foreboding, now seems filled with endless possibilities. As the battle ends and the warriors stand amidst the fallen, the weight of the victory settles into the air. The battlefield, once chaotic with cries of war, now carries an eerie, almost peaceful silence. The warriors, though bruised and bloodied, feel a sense of accomplishment wash over them, like a calm after the storm. Their kingdom, which was once on the brink of destruction, now stands resolute, saved not just by the might of its soldiers, but by something far greater: the celestial guidance of the star that had appeared on that fateful night. There's no mistaking it now. The star had played its part. It had led them, given them strength when all hope seemed lost, and in the end, it had brought them victory. You stand there with them, watching as they offer prayers of thanks to the heavens, their heads bowed in reverence. The star, though no longer visible, seems to linger in their hearts. They know deep down that this victory was more than just the result of human hands. It was the will of the cosmos. Perhaps it was the gods, or perhaps it was the universe itself that had intervened at the right moment to change their fate. Whatever the reason, the warriors now carry with them the knowledge that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. They had not just fought for land, they had fought for a future, for the continuation of their people, their culture, their very way of life. Historians still argue whether the star's appearance was truly a divine sign or just a fortuitous event that happened to coincide with a great battle. Some believe that the warriors, fueled by their belief in the star's power, fought with such conviction that they turned the tide of the battle themselves. Others contend that the star was a mere symbol, a guiding light that helped inspire the warriors to push past their limits. One thing is for certain, though, the victory would be remembered for generations, not only for the bravery of the warriors, but for the mysterious star that had written their fate in the heavens. And as the kingdom rebuilds, its people flourish, the star's legacy endures. It becomes a symbol of hope, of the belief that when the darkness threatens to consume all, there is always something or someone that can light the way. The warriors, their story passed down through the ages, continue to inspire those who follow, reminding them that no matter how dire the circumstances, the stars may still be watching over them. Perhaps, like the warriors, they too will find their own guiding light in the darkest of times. The memory of the star and the victory it led them to will live on forever. Now, as you drift into this quiet, reflective moment, the battle's echoes fade. The warrior's triumphant march is no longer an image in the distance, but a story etched into the very fabric of time. You're left with the knowledge that sometimes victory doesn't come from brute strength alone. It comes from believing in the impossible, trusting that the stars might just be guiding you towards something greater. End of script. Sweet dreams.